Hello everyone and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast is part of a Papillae Sirocco series. This audio podcast is part of a Labostix Communicado. This audio podcast is part of a Squadron Kamikaze, and this audio podcast is part of a Storm Labostix production. In this audio podcast, a little bit around sort of around some aspects, some basic aspects in around HUS, HUS management in around HUS management. So either hemodialysis or peritoneal dialysis treatments are essential when renal function is altered. It is crucial to control the crucial to control the hypertension in peds and young people, thus preventing any longer term complications. And pathophysiology informs in around the pathophysiology informs that in peds and in young people diagnosed with HUS, owing to the the sort of 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 compromised glomeruli, or the renal tufts, or what's referred to as the renal tufts, as part of the glomeruli, where the glomeruli are compromised. um, uh, any sort of strain in peds and young people, and in peds and young people, where hypertension can form part of the part of the symptomology. The renin-angiotensin mechanism, or renin-angiotensin aldosterone system or mechanisms, can cause a sort of more issues around the pathophysiology in peds and young people, where HUS is concerned. Red blood cell transfusion. So red blood cell transfusion in children and young people, historically has been used and had been common, but mainly to treat the hemoglobin, the low hemoglobin, and the anemia sort of symptom. Fraction frozen plasma, or FFP, has also been administered in patients who have gone in from HUS from peds, and where peds and young people are transitioned with HUS into adults. So FFP has been used. Fraction frozen plasma, or FFP, has been used in adult HUS recipients. And at the same time, a little bit around some additional sort of anatomical bases in around HUS. That normally or can help inform specialists in around sort of aspects around the care for young people with HUS. So the afferent and afferent arterioles, so those arterioles that lead into the kidneys, and part of the glomeruli, and then the glomeruli can show inflammation. Thus why the glomeruli in the glomeruli in HUS patients, as informed in a previous audio podcast as part of this series. Under histological staining can show a sort of a microthrombi informing or help inform that the glomeruli show a sort of a microangiopathic sort of picture, and so the afferent arterioles, the arterioles leading into the kidneys, are sort of show a sense of inflammation. There's also ischemic necrosis, so there can be sort of a sort of a sort of a sort of a restriction around the renal cortex, where renal physiology is concerned, and this may occur from the intravascular coagulation. So where there is evidence of microangiopathy, there can be a sort of a intravascular coagulation. There can be a sort of intravascular coagulation and an ischemic necrosis, which also occurs. There can be also glomerular thrombosis, a glomerular thrombosis and sclerosis. So there can be a complete sort of cell death around the glomeruli owing to the thrombosis and the sclerosis. And there can be hypercellularity as well, and there can be sclerosis around the sort of where the tough part of the also referred to in physiology as the glomerular tuft. There can be the sclerosis, a sort of pronounced sclerosis around the tufts of the glomeruli. There can be a fibrinous necrosis in places and some tubule interstitial compartments that show atrophic changes with infiltration of the inflammatory cells. There can be endocapillary swelling with diffuse arteriolar and arterioluminal stenoses due to the thickness and sclerotic changes of the media and intima, and generally as part of the morphological as part of the anatomical basis and the histological sort of features. Again, there can be a general scarring throughout in HUS recipients. So the next audio podcast will delve into a little bit around the research perspectives as part of this audio podcast series. This has been an audio podcast as part of the Papillae Sirocco series, an audio podcast as part of a Labostix Communicado, an audio podcast as part of a Squadron Kamikaze, an audio podcast as part of a Storm Labostix production.